Under the harsh Texas sun, John Miller stood in the gleaming marble lobby of First National Bank, his weathered boots leaving dusty prints on the polished floor. The bank manager's laughter still echoed in his ears. A loan! For a dirt farmer! But what those bankers didn't know was that their mockery had caught the attention of someone else, a shadow in an expensive suit watching from the corner. That night, as storm clouds gathered over Miller's failing farm, a black Mercedes pulled up to his gate. By sunrise, a leather briefcase would change everything. The question wasn't just about money, it was about justice. Could a man they'd looked down on their whole lives become the one person they couldn't ignore? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the Texas sky in shades of amber when John Miller's hand reached for his grandfather's pocket watch on the bedside table. 4:45 a.m., right on schedule. The watch's brass case was dulled by generations of calloused hands, but its heart beat as true as the day his grandfather had first wound it. Sarah's voice drifted from the kitchen, along with the aroma of coffee. "Dad, you're going to wear yourself out again." At 17, she had her mother's practical mind and sharp eyes. The college brochures scattered across the kitchen table didn't escape his notice, or the way she quickly tucked them into her backpack. "Can't wear out what's already worn, sweetheart." John managed to smile, though his joints creaked like old barn doors as he settled into his chair. The coffee was strong and black, just like his father had taught him. Some habits died harder than others. Through the window, the first hints of sunrise kissed their 200 acres. Once, this land had been the pride of Riverside County. Now, brown patches dotted the wheat fields where irrigation couldn't reach, and the ancient tracker sat idle more often than not, parts too expensive to replace. Sarah placed a plate of eggs in front of him, their last 3, though neither mentioned it. "Mr. Henderson called yesterday, said the cooperative might have some extra work." She hesitated. "If you're interested." John's fingers tightened around the watch chain. "Henderson's been good people since before you were born, but I won't take charity." "It's not charity, Dad, it's community." The word hung between them like morning mist. Community. Once it had meant something in Riverside, before First National Bank started buying up foreclosed farms. Before Richard Wellington and his Italian suits showed up with promises of modernization that left half the county in debt. John stood, his coffee half finished. "Got to check the irrigation before it gets too hot." He pretended not to notice Sarah's worried glance as he pulled on his work boots, the ones with soles worn thin as paper. His daddy would have replaced them months ago, but his daddy hadn't lived to see banks turn farming into a game of numbers rather than a way of life. Outside, the morning air carried whispers of approaching autumn. John's boots left tracks in the dew as he walked the familiar path to the wheat fields. Each step brought fresh aches, reminders of 30 years of dawn to dusk labor. The irrigation system sputtered to life with its usual protest of rusted joints and tired pipes. He pulled his grandfather's watch from his pocket again, letting the chain pool in his palm. The old man's initials were still visible on the case. T.M., Thomas Miller. 3 generations of Millers had worked this land, marked time with this watch, believed in the simple truth that honest work and clean living would see you through. But honest work didn't count for much at First National Bank. Richard Wellington had made that clear enough yesterday, lounging behind his mahogany desk like some kind of small-town emperor. "The numbers don't lie, Mr. Miller, and your numbers—" That smirk, that goddamn smirk as he shuffled papers he hadn't even bothered to read. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "It's not charity, Dad. It's community." Maybe she was right. Maybe pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore, not with her college dreams withering like the dry patches in his fields. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. John Miller stood in his failing wheat field, his grandfather's watch keeping time in his pocket, marking the minutes until the bank opened. One last try. One last chance to make them see that a man's worth couldn't be measured in columns of red ink. The watch ticked steadily against his chest as he turned back toward the house. Behind him, the irrigation system coughed once and died, another piece of his father's legacy surrendering to time and rust. First National Bank's lobby gleamed like a chapel built to worship money. Security cameras tracked John's progress across the marble floor, his weathered boots leaving trails of red Texas dirt with each step. The mourning crowd of account holders parted before him, not out of respect, but from the kind of instinctive distaste reserved for things that didn't belong. The loan application forms felt heavy in his hands. 3 copies, filled out in his best handwriting, each number triple-checked by Sarah the night before. She'd even ironed his one good shirt, cotton, faded blue, smelling of starch and hope. Mr. Miller. Richard Wellington's voice dripped with manufactured courtesy. Please come into my office. The bank manager's suit probably cost more than John's monthly mortgage payment. His silver cufflinks caught the fluorescent light as he gestured toward the open door. A man in an expensive charcoal suit sat in the corner of the lobby, partially hidden behind a Financial Times. Something about his stillness caught John's attention. He didn't fidget or scroll through a phone like the other customers. He simply watched, his features obscured by the newspaper. Wellington's office was a shrine to success. Framed certificates competed with golf trophies for shelf space. A degree from some prestigious university hung behind his desk like a crown. Now then, Wellington settled into his leather chair. What seems to be the trouble? John placed the applications on the desk. I need a bridge loan, just until harvest. The irrigation system. Yes. Wellington didn't even glance at the papers. Your situation is familiar to us, Mr. Miller. How many times have we had this conversation? 3 times since spring. John's fingers found his grandfather's watch in his pocket. Its steady ticking helped him keep his voice level. But this time I've got collateral. The East Field. Wellington's laugh cut through the air like a whip. Collateral? That worthless patch of dirt? He stood, walking to his window. Look out there, Miller. What? Do you see? Progress, development, the future? He gestured to the construction sites dotting the horizon. And here you are, still playing in the dirt like it's 1950. That dirt fed this county for 3 generations. The watch ticked faster against John's palm, matching his rising pulse. And now it can't even feed your own family. Wellington's smile was a shark's smile, all teeth and predatory satisfaction. Tell me, how is Sarah? Still dreaming of college? He picked up a framed photo from his desk. My Thomas is at Yale now. Full ride, of course, merit scholarship. The implied comparison hung in the air like smoke. John's chest tightened. Through the office window, he caught a glimpse of the man, in the charcoal suit, now standing near the bank's entrance. For a moment their eyes met. The application, John started, is denied. Wellington didn't even pretend to read it. Face reality, Miller. You're a relic. The world has moved on. The smart farmers sold years ago. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a confidential whisper. I could make you an offer right now. Fair market value for the whole property. Save yourself the embarrassment of foreclosure. John stood slowly, his father's voice echoing in his memory. A miller stands tall, even when standing's all he's got left. My grandfather bought that land with a handshake and his word. John's voice carried across the office. Through the glass walls, he noticed other customers turning to watch. Back when this bank understood that a man's character was worth more than his credit score. Wellington's smile hardened. Your grandfather's day is done, Miller. Banking is about numbers now. And your numbers. He made a show of examining the application before tearing it in half. Well, they tell quite a story. The sound of tearing paper echoed like thunder. From the corner of his eye, John saw the man in the charcoal suit step forward slightly, his expression unreadable. 30 years. John's voice was quiet now. 30. Years I've banked here, never missed a payment until the drought hit, never asked for more than I could repay. Then you shouldn't have any trouble finding another bank. Wellington pressed a button on his desk. Security will show you out. As John walked through the lobby, head high despite the weight of defeat, he felt the stranger's eyes following him. Outside, the Texas sun beat down like judgment, but something made him turn back for one last look. Through the glass doors, he saw the man in the charcoal suit approach Wellington's office. Unlike the other customers, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to being noticed only when he chose to be. Just before the doors closed, John caught a glimpse of a business card being placed on Wellington's desk. Marcus Chen, Century Investments. Thunder rolled across the Texas plains like God clearing his throat. John sat on his porch, watching lightning sketch white-hot signatures across the darkening sky. The rejection at the bank played on repeat in his mind, each memory a fresh cut. The Mercedes appeared first, as twin points of light piercing the gloom. Black, new, the kind of car that had no business on a dirt road in this part of the county. It pulled up to his gate with the quiet confidence of wealth, idling for exactly 30 seconds before pulling away. No one stepped out, no one called out, just the quiet thump of something being placed by his gate. John waited, counting his breaths like his father had taught him to do when the world felt too heavy. 1 minute, 2. The Mercedes's taillights disappeared around the bend, swallowed by the gathering storm. Lightning flashed again, illuminating a solitary object by the gate. A briefcase. Sarah's voice drifted from inside. "Dad, was that a car?" "Stay." Inside, John stepped into the rain, his boots sinking into mud that smelled of promises and possibilities. The briefcase sat like a question mark against his gatepost. Black leather, gold clasps, the kind of craftsmanship that spoke of boardrooms and corner offices. No name, no note, just the weight of opportunity in his calloused hands. Inside, Sarah waited at the kitchen table, her college applications spread out like dreams on paper. The briefcase left a wet spot on the worn tablecloth. "Should we call the sheriff?" Sarah's voice trembled with equal parts fear and curiosity. John's fingers found the clasps. Might be a mistake. Might be... The clasps opened with well-oiled precision. Inside, neat stacks of $100 bills filled half the space, more money than John had seen in his life. The other half held a single envelope, cream-colored paper bearing a simple message in precise handwriting. "Mr. Miller, some investments require more than numbers on a page. The money is yours, no strings attached. What you do with it will determine if we have a longer conversation." "MC," Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Dad, how much is there?" John's fingers, steady from years of mechanical work, counted quickly. $5 million. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like speaking a language he'd never learned. "It has to be a trick." Sarah reached for her phone. "Or something. Illegal. We should..." "Wait." John pulled out his grandfather's watch, studying it alongside the briefcase. Old money and new, heritage and opportunity. MC, the man at the bank, Marcus Chen, the one in the fancy suit. But why would he? A contract lay beneath the money, its terms surprisingly simple. The funds were a gift, fully documented and tax-compliant. No repayment required, no obligations stated or implied. Thunder cracked overhead as John read the final page. A sticky note marked one paragraph. "Sometimes justice wears a different face than we expect." "What are you thinking?" Sarah watched, her father's expression shift like weather across the plains. John touched the worn face of his grandfather's watch, then the smooth leather of the briefcase. "I'm thinking about something your grandfather used to say. The Lord works in mysterious ways, but he expects us to do the heavy lifting." He stood, decision crystallizing like morning frost. "First thing tomorrow, we're going to need a good lawyer and a business plan." "A business plan?" Sarah's eyes widened. "For what?" John smiled, and for the first time in years, the expression reached his eyes. for showing Richard Wellington what a dirt farmer can really do. Outside, the storm broke, rain washing the Texas earth clean. The briefcase sat open on their kitchen table, its contents promising more than money, promising a chance to rewrite the story Wellington thought was already finished. John Miller had walked into First National Bank that morning as a desperate man. But tomorrow he'd walk in as something else entirely. The thought warmed him like summer sunshine, even as the storm raged on. Morning found John Miller at the kitchen table, his mother's Bible open before him. He'd spent half the hour, night reading Proverbs, searching for guidance in ancient words. The briefcase sat beside the Bible, an unlikely companion to generations of family wisdom. Sarah came downstairs wearing her mother's determined expression. I couldn't sleep. She placed 2 steaming coffee mugs on the table, careful to avoid the scattered papers, bank statements, deed copies, and preliminary notes for what they'd started calling the plan. Makes 2 of us. John closed the Bible, his finger marking Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. Dad. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. This isn't vanity money. This is an opportunity. Outside, a truck rumbled past. Bill Henderson's boy, heading to the cooperative. News traveled fast in small towns, and their mysterious visitor hadn't gone unnoticed. By noon, half the county would be speculating about the black Mercedes at Miller's gate. Your mother would have known what to do. John traced the Bible's worn cover. Claire always saw clearer than me. Mum would have said to trust your gut. Sarah pulled out a chair, spreading her college brochures alongside the financial papers. What's your gut telling you? John's hand found his grandfather's watch. That there's no such thing as free money. That Marcus Chen didn't get rich by making bad investments. He paused, watching the sunrise paint their kitchen in shades of possibility. And that maybe the Lord answers prayers in ways we don't expect. Sarah's fingers brushed the college applications, dreams that had seemed impossible yesterday. We could do so much good, Dad, not just for us, for everyone Wellington's hurt. The morning light caught the gold clasps of the briefcase, throwing tiny spots of brilliance across the kitchen walls. John thought about Wellington's smirk, about foreclosed farms and broken promises, about how money wasn't just currency, it was power. And power, like his daddy always said, was only as good as the hands holding it. First things first. John stood, decision settling over him like a familiar coat. We need to talk to Reverend Davis. Sarah blinked. The Reverend? Why? Because if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. John tucked his mother's Bible into its place of honor on the shelf. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about restoration. They found Reverend Davis in the church garden, tending to late summer tomatoes. His weathered hands seemed more comfortable with soil than scripture, something John had always appreciated about him. The Lord moves in mysterious ways, the Reverend said after hearing their story. He plucked a ripe tomato, offering it to Sarah. But he expects us to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Is it right? John asked. The question that had kept him awake. Taking this money? Reverend Davis smiled, the kind of smile that had counseled 3 generations of troubled souls. Remember Joseph in Egypt? Sometimes God puts resources in unexpected hands for his purposes. He gestured to the church building behind them. This land was donated by your grandfather, John. He understood that wealth was a tool for community. Building. Sarah's eyes brightened. The Agricultural Education Center. Dad, remember what we talked about? We could actually do it now. The Reverend's eyebrows rose. Education Center. Just an idea. John felt the weight of possibility settling on his shoulders. Teaching sustainable farming methods, helping smaller farms modernize without going into debt. Maybe even start a community-owned bank, like the old credit union. Reverend Davis nodded, before First National bought it out. A plan was taking shape, built on generations of wisdom and modern opportunity. John thought about Wellington's dismissive laugh, about Marcus Chen's silent observation, about Sarah's dreams and his community's needs. "We'll need help," he said finally. "People we can trust. The Lord provides," Reverend Davis smiled, "often through community." He reached into his garden apron, pulling out a business card worn soft at the edges. "And speaking of provision, a gentleman came by this morning, asked me to give you this." The card was cream-colored, elegant in its simplicity. "Marcus Chen, Century Investments." On the back, handwritten, "Ready when you are." Sarah squeezed her father's hand. In the distance, church bells began to ring, calling the faithful to witness something new being born in the heart of Texas farmland. Marcus. Jen's office occupied the entire top floor of Austin's newest sustainable building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Texas that seemed to stretch forever, making John feel like he was standing at the edge of two worlds. His small-town reality and something much bigger. "My father was a rice farmer in rural China," Chen said, pouring tea into delicate cups that probably cost more than John's truck. "He died believing his hands were worth less than the dirt they worked." Something in his voice resonated with John's own struggles. "But he taught me something valuable. True wealth grows from the ground up." Sarah sat beside her father, back straight, college application portfolio balanced on her lap. Chen had specifically requested she attend. Her eyes kept drifting to the agricultural tech displays lining the walls. Hydroponic systems, drone, monitoring stations, soil analysis tools that looked more at home in a science fiction movie than a farm. "Why us?" John asked, his grandfather's watch a familiar weight in his pocket. "There are plenty of struggling farms in Texas." Chen smiled, rising to stand by the window. 3 weeks ago, I watched Richard Wellington tear up your loan application without reading it, but that's not what caught my attention." He turned, fixing John with a penetrating stare. "What interested me was what you did next." "I walked out," John said. "No." Chen's eyes sparkled. "You walked out with dignity. Head high, back straight. A man who'd lost a battle but hadn't surrendered his self-respect." He pressed a button, and a holographic display sprang to life between them, showing Riverside County from above. "Do you know what I see here?" Sarah leaned forward. "Potential." "Exactly." Chen's approval was immediate. "Your father sees farmland. Wellington sees real estate development opportunities. But you," he nodded at Sarah, "you see what I see. Potential for transformation." He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on Miller's farm. "Your irrigation problems aren't unique. The entire region is facing water management issues, but instead of solving the problem, Wellington's bank is exploiting it, forcing farmers to sell at a fraction of their land's true value." John's hands tightened around his teacup. "We've noticed. What if," Chen said, "we could introduce sustainable irrigation technology that cuts water usage by 60%, smart soil monitoring that predicts crop yields with 95% accuracy, community-based farming, education that helps small farmers compete with industrial agriculture?" Sarah pulled out her notebook, already taking notes. "The agricultural education center we talked about, think bigger." Chen pressed another button, and the hologram expanded to show the entire county. A network of education centers, farmer-owned. Cooperatives, a community bank that understands the rhythms of agricultural life. He sat down again, his expression serious. "But it has to start somewhere, with someone Wellington and his cronies have underestimated." John thought about his grandfather's watch, ticking away in his pocket. About generations of millers who'd worked the land not just for profit, but for community. About Sarah's dreams, and his neighbor's struggles. "Why now?" he asked. "Why me?" Chen's smile held decades of calculated patience. "Because sometimes the best investments aren't about money at all. They're about character." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is a preliminary proposal. Take it home. Discuss it with your daughter, your community. I'm not Wellington. I don't need an answer in the next 5 minutes. Inside the folder, John glimpsed detailed plans, budgets, technological specifications, a complete vision for transforming not just his farm, but the entire region's approach to agriculture. One last thing, Chen said as they stood to leave. The 5 million? It's yours regardless of your decision. Consider it an investment in human dignity. In the elevator heading down, Sarah could barely contain her excitement. Dad, this is exactly what we've been talking about, but better, with this kind of backing. Hold on, John said, but he was smiling. First, we need to talk to some people. Bill Henderson, the Reverend, maybe even old Jim Tucker. Why them? John thought about Chen's words. True wealth grows from the ground up. Because if we're going to change things, we're going to do it the right way, as a community. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, where the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of possibility. John's grandfather's watch ticked steadily in his pocket, marking time between the old ways and the new, between individual struggle and community triumph. The drone hummed overhead like a mechanical dragonfly, mapping Miller's East Field with precision that would have seemed like magic to his grandfather. Sarah stood beside the control tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen as data poured in. Soil moisture levels, mineral content, crop health indicators, a symphony of information that was already transforming their understanding of the land. See this pattern here? She pointed to a color-coded overlay. The irrigation problems aren't just about water flow. There's a mineral deficiency affecting how the soil retains moisture. Bill Henderson whistled low, pushing back his weathered cap. In all my years farming, I never would have spotted that without digging up half the field. A small crowd had gathered at the edge of the property, curious neighbors drawn by the sight of sleek Century Investments trucks delivering equipment that looked more Silicon Valley than Texas farmland. John recognized faces that hadn't visited since Claire's funeral. The Tuckers, the Ramirez, even old Pete Wilson, who'd lost his dairy farm to Wellington's predatory loans. It's not natural, Pete muttered, but his eyes followed the drone's flight path with poorly concealed fascination. Farming's supposed to be about getting your hands dirty. My hands are plenty dirty, Pete. John held up calloused palms. This technology just helps them work smarter. The new irrigation system was a marvel of engineering. Micro-targeted water delivery combined with soil amendments based on real-time analysis. Chen's team had installed it in 3 days, working alongside local contractors John had insisted on hiring. Look at this. Sarah pulled up another screen showing side-by-side comparisons. Water usage is already down 40%, and the crop health indicators are actually improving. Bill Henderson stepped closer, squinting at the numbers. And you're saying we could implement this on other farms? That's the plan. John gestured toward the newly constructed equipment shed, its solar panels gleaming in the Texas sun. The education center will train farmers on these systems. Free classes, hands-on experience. Chen's providing the technology, but the knowledge belongs to the community. A murmur rippled through the crowd. John caught fragments of conversation. Could save my West Field. Bank turned down my loan for half this much. Wellington won't like this. As if summoned by his name, a Blacktown car pulled up to the property line. Richard Wellington stepped out, his Italian shoes incongruous against the dirt road. The crowd parted instinctively, old habits of deference dying hard. Quite a show, Miller. Wellington's smile didn't reach his eyes. I hope you've considered the liability issues. Drones, experimental irrigation, one accident could cost you everything. Everything's up to code and fully insured. Sarah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Century Investments takes care of their partners. Wellington's gaze flickered to her, then back to John. Partners? Is that what you think you are? He laughed, but there was an edge to it. Marcus Chen doesn't partner with dirt farmers. He's playing some game, and you're just a pawn. Maybe. John pulled out his grandfather's watch, checking the time with deliberate casualness. Or maybe he just recognizes something you never did. The difference between price and value. A new sound cut through the tension, Bill Henderson's ringtone. He answered, listened, then slowly lowered the phone, face pale. "The bank. They're calling in my equipment loan, saying there's been a review of lending criteria." Wellington's smile widened. "Banking is a complex business. Risk assessments change." "They sure do." The voice came from behind them. Marcus Chen stood by his Mercedes, suit jacket draped over, one arm in concession to the Texas heat, which is why Century Investments is launching a new agricultural lending division. Local management, flexible terms, profit-sharing options. He nodded to Bill. "We'd be happy to refinance that equipment loan, Mr. Henderson, at half your current rate." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Wellington's face darkened. "You can't just—" Century's banking charter was approved this morning. Chen's voice carried across the field. "We're looking to partner with farmers who understand that innovation and tradition aren't enemies. They're the seeds of sustainable growth." John watched hope bloom across faces that had known too much hardship. Sarah was already surrounded by younger farmers, explaining the drone's capabilities with contagious enthusiasm. Even Pete Wilson had moved closer to the irrigation controls, pretending not to be interested. "This isn't over, Miller." Wellington turned back to his car, but his exit lacked its usual imperious confidence. "No," John agreed quietly, watching his community come alive with possibility. "It's just beginning." The Riverside County Farmers Market had always been more than just a place to sell produce. It was where deals were made, marriages arranged, and reputations built or broken. This Saturday morning, it was where the revolution truly began. John's stand drew crowds like never before. The tomatoes were bigger, the corn sweeter, and the prices, thanks to reduced water costs, were lower than anyone else's. But it wasn't just the produce drawing attention. It was the small tablet display showing real-time data from his fields, and Sarah's impromptu demonstrations of their new farming techniques. "Look at these soil analysis reports," Bill Henderson was saying to a group of younger farmers. His own tablet displayed similar readings from his recently upgraded fields. "First time in 15 years, my yield projections are actually reliable." The local paper lay open on John's counter, its headline bold and unmistakable. "Local Farm Pioneers New Agricultural Methods." Below it, a photo showed John and Sarah standing beside their drone, Century Investments' sleek technology contrasting with their traditional farming backdrop. "Your daddy would be proud." Maria Ramirez, who'd run the neighboring stand for 30 years, pressed a fresh tamale into John's hands. "He always said the Millers were meant for more than just working the land." "The land is still everything," John said, but he understood what she meant. The success wasn't just about better crops or lower costs. It was about dignity restored. Commotion at the market entrance drew their attention. Richard Wellington walked through the crowded aisles like a storm cloud in an expensive suit, trailed by two men carrying briefcases. "Health and safety inspection," Wellington announced, his voice carrying across the market. "In light of recent innovations in local farming practices, the bank is concerned about potential risks to consumers." The inspectors moved from stand to stand, making a show of examining produce and checking paperwork. When they reached John's display, Wellington's smile was razor-sharp. My. Quite the operation you've built, Miller. I do hope all these electronic devices are properly certified for agricultural use." Before John could respond, Sarah stepped forward, pulling out a thick binder. "Everything's documented here, including Century's compliance certificates and our new organic farming certification." She met Wellington's gaze. "Would you like to see our water quality reports too? They're quite interesting." Wellington's smile flickered. Behind him, other farmers were pulling out similar binders. Chen's team had prepared them for exactly this kind of challenge. "This isn't a game," Wellington hissed, quiet enough that only John and Sarah could hear. "You're disrupting decades of established business. Practices. There will be consequences." "Already are." Bill Henderson approached, tablet in hand. "Just got word. 3 more farms signed up with Century's banking division this morning. Seems folks prefer lenders who help them succeed instead of waiting for them to fail." The market crowd had grown silent, watching the confrontation. Wellington looked around, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes on him, the barely concealed hostility in formally deferential faces. "You're all making a serious mistake," he announced to the crowd. "First National has been this community's backbone for generations. We understand farming. These tech industry interlopers are just here to collect data and move on." "Like you collected my daddy's farm." Young Tommy Tucker stepped forward. "Foreclosed right after the funeral, even though we only needed 90 days to make good." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. More voices joined in, each with a story of Wellington's predatory practices. "This market," Wellington tried again, "operates on city property. Property that First National has significant influence over. It would be a shame if what?" Marcus Chen's voice cut through the tension. He stood at the market entrance, a folder tucked under his arm. "If you reminded everyone that the market's lease is up for renewal." "Interesting timing." He held up the folder. "I just finished meeting with the city council. They were very interested in Century's proposal for modernizing the market. Solar panels, improved facilities, expanded parking, all funded through our community development program." Wellington's face went through a complex series of expressions before settling on cold fury. "This isn't over, Chen." "Actually," Chen smiled, "I think it is. First National's regional office has some interesting questions about your loan approval patterns. I believe they're reviewing your position as we speak." As Wellington stormed out, the market erupted in conversation. John felt Sarah's hand slip into his. "Dad," she whispered, "look." All around them farmers were talking, sharing tablets, comparing notes. The invisible walls that had kept them isolated in their struggles were finally coming down. Sarah found the ledger by accident. She was helping the Hendersons digitize their farm records when she noticed a pattern in their loan statements. Subtle discrepancies that seemed minor in isolation, but formed a disturbing picture when viewed together. "Dad, look at this." She spread the documents across their kitchen table, where John's grandfather's watch kept time beside a stack of similar records from other farms. The interest rate adjustments always happened right before major equipment purchases were due. And look at the dates. They match perfectly with Wellington's property acquisitions. John studied the numbers, his expression darkening. "How many farms?" "I've confirmed 12 so far." Sarah pulled up a map on her tablet, red dots marking each. "Affected property. All foreclosed, all bought by Wellington's investment groups at fraction of their value." Thunder rolled outside, a summer storm gathering strength over the Texas plains. The kitchen lights flickered, and John was reminded of another stormy night when a black Mercedes had changed their lives. "We need to show this to Chen," he started, but a pounding at the door interrupted him. Bill Henderson burst in, rain-soaked and breathless. "They're trying to freeze us out. First National's calling in loans across the county. Not just farm loans, home mortgages, business lines, everything." Sarah's tablet chimed with incoming messages, similar reports from other farmers. Wellington was making his move, trying to crush the rebellion before it could take root. "He's desperate." Chen's voice came from the doorway. No one had heard him arrive. "And desperate men make mistakes." The billionaire looked different tonight. Less the polished investor, more the farmer's son he'd once been. He joined them at the table, examining Sarah's findings with growing interest. "This is exactly what we needed," he said finally. "But Wellington's not working alone. A bank manager doesn't have this kind of authority without support from above." "Regional Director Phillips," Sarah said. Everyone turned to look at her. "I found his name buried in the approval chains." Every major foreclosure required his signature. Chen's eyes narrowed. Thomas Phillips, the same man who's been blocking our banking charter applications? It's bigger than we thought, John said quietly. The storm outside intensified, rain hammering. Against the windows, like nature itself was demanding justice. Lightning flashed, illuminating worried faces around the kitchen table. We need to move fast, Chen said. Wellington's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's going to try to push through a mass foreclosure action before. These records can come to light. Can he do that? Bill asked. Not legally, Sarah answered, still scanning through documents. But by the time the courts stop him, people will have already lost their homes, their livelihoods. John stood, decision crystallizing. Then we go public. Now. Tonight. The media won't move fast enough, Chen warned. We don't need the media. Sarah was already typing on her tablet. We need the community. Look. She pulled up the local Facebook groups, farming forums, community message boards. Within minutes, she had drafted a clear, detailed exposé of Wellington's schemes, backed by scanned documents and data analysis. If we share this tonight, it'll reach every farmer in the county before that board meeting. They can't foreclose. On everyone if everyone knows they're coming. It's risky, Chen cautioned. Wellington could sue for defamation. Let him. John's voice was steel. Truth is still truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The kitchen lights flickered again as Sarah hit post. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her tablet began chiming, shares, comments, angry reactions, spreading like wildfire across the digital landscape. Look at this, Bill pointed to his phone. The Tuckers are organizing a protest at First National. The Ramirez are calling everyone they know. Even old Pete Wilson's sharing it. Chen smiled, grimly. Wellington's going to wake up to quite a storm. No, John corrected. He's going to wake up to a community that's finally had enough. Sarah's tablet kept chiming as more evidence poured in. Other farmers finding similar patterns in their records, sharing their stories, connecting dots that had been hidden in plain sight for years. Dad, she said softly, remember what Grandpa used to say about storms? John nodded, picking up his grandfather's watch. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away old marks of defeat and nourishing seeds of change planted in newly fertile ground. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, in a farmhouse kitchen in Texas, justice had found its voice, and it was speaking in chorus. Dawn painted First National Bank in harsh light as protesters gathered on its manicured lawn. Dozens of pickup trucks lined the street, their beds filled with produce, a mockery of the farmers' market Wellington had tried to shut down. Sarah's college acceptance letter burned in John's pocket like a beacon of what they were fighting. Miller, Wellington's voice crackled through a hastily assembled PA system. Your daughter's lies are going to cost people their homes. The crowd stirred angrily. Signs waved in the morning air. Farmers feed families, banks bleed them dry, and Wellington, the only toxic thing in our fields. Those aren't lies. John's voice carried without artificial amplification, decades of calling across fields giving it natural authority. Every number, every date, every foreclosure is documented. You want to talk about costs. Let's talk about Tommy Tucker's daddy dying of a heart attack when you called his loan. Let's talk about the Ramirez kids dropping out of college when you seized their equipment. Wellington's smile was a serpentine thing. Such concern for your neighbors. Is that why you're in bed with foreign investors? Letting Chinese drones spy on American farms? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Wellington had pressed his advantage. Marcus Chen isn't your savior, folks. He's a data harvester. Every drone flight, every soil reading, it's all going straight to overseas servers. How long before Chinese companies know more about your farms than you do? John felt the crowd's uncertainty. Even Bill Henderson shifted uncomfortably. And, Miller, Wellington's voice dripped false concern. Your precious partner has an interesting history. Farms failing mysteriously after accepting his help. Traditional methods replaced by patented technologies that leave farmers dependent on his companies. Ask yourself, Why would a billionaire care about a dirt farmer? Sarah stepped forward, tablet raised. Because some billionaires remember where they came from, unlike some bank managers who forget who grows their food. Wellington's face darkened. Miss Miller, still playing with computers instead of finding honest work. Tell me, how many of your neighbors' private financial records did you hack to create your little conspiracy theory? None. The new voice cut through the tension like a blade. Marcus Chen walked through the crowd, followed by two men in federal windbreakers. Sarah Miller accessed only publicly available data and records legally shared by their owners, the same records that are now in the hands of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Wellington's composure cracked. You can't. Regional Director Phillips rolled over an hour ago, Chen continued calmly. Apparently he's been keeping his own records. Something about insurance against overzealous local managers who might drag him down with them. The federal agents moved toward the bank's entrance. Wellington grabbed the microphone again. Think about what you're doing. Without First National, without proper banking oversight, you'll all be at the mercy of outsiders like Chen. Is that what you want? Chinese drones watching your every move? Silicon Valley telling you how to farm your own land? No, John said quietly. What we want is simple. The same thing my grandfather wanted. The same thing every farmer wants. A fair chance to work our land, feed our families, and build something for our children. He pulled out his grandfather's watch. You see this? It's kept perfect time through 3 generations of millers. Not because it's fancy, but because it was made with respect for the craft. Farming's no different. We're not against progress. We're against progress that forgets its roots. The crowd's mood shifted again, anger transforming into something more. You're powerful. Determination. Chen's drones don't tell us how to farm, Bill Henderson called out. They help us farm better. The way we choose, the way we always have. And the data, John turned to Wellington, stays right here in Texas, in servers owned by a new cooperative we're announcing today. Farmer-owned, farmer-controlled. Wellington's face went through a complex series of emotions before settling on defeat. Behind him, the federal agents were already entering the bank. Sarah's tablet chimed. A news alert. The regional office had just announced an emergency audit of all First National's rural lending practices. Dad, she whispered, touching his arm. We did it. No, sweetheart. John watched as his community, his neighbors, began to realize they'd won. We all did it. Together. The morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows behind them as they faced their future. In John's pocket, his grandfather's watch kept time, marking the moments between what had been and what could be. The old barn at Miller's farm had seen 3 generations of community gatherings, but never one quite like this. Farmers filled every available space, their faces illuminated by a mix of traditional lanterns and the soft glow of tablets. The newly drafted cooperative charter lay open on a central table, its pages bright and full of promise. It's not just about banking, Chen explained, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as he moved through the crowd. It's about creating a sustainable agricultural ecosystem that serves the community first. The holographic display from his office had been recreated here, floating above the charter like a vision of the future. But now it showed more than just Miller's farm. It displayed a network of interconnected properties, each one a potential node in something larger. Every farm that joins strengthens the whole, Sarah explained, highlighting connections between properties. Shared resources, shared knowledge, shared profit, shared risk too, Pete Wilson noted, but his usual skepticism had been replaced by cautious hope. If one fails, we all feel it. That's the point. John stepped forward, his grandfather's watch in hand. We've all been failing alone for too long. Wellington knew that isolation was his best weapon. Together, we're stronger. The charter's first page bore a simple but powerful declaration. We, the farmers of Riverside County, unite to preserve our heritage while embracing our future. Bill Henderson studied the document. This section about technology sharing, you're sure we maintain control? Absolutely. Chen pointed to specific clauses. The cooperative owns all data collected. My company provides the tools, but you decide how to use them. Think of it like the tractors in your fields. They're just tools to help you farm better your way. Sarah pulled up footage from Miller's drone. Look at these soil patterns. They don't stop at property lines. What affects one farm affects its neighbors. By sharing data, we can predict problems before they spread, coordinate planting schedules, even create microclimate forecasts. And the banking side? Maria Ramirez asked. How do we know it won't become another First National? John smiled. Show them, Sarah. His daughter tapped her tablet, and the hologram shifted to display the cooperative's banking structure. Every major decision requires a 70% vote from member farmers. Loan terms are standardized, transparent, and tied to realistic agricultural timelines. And look here, she highlighted a section. Profit sharing based on both individual success and community improvement. Community improvement? Tommy Tucker leaned forward. What does that mean exactly? Chen's eyes lit up. That's where it gets interesting. Every loan includes an education component. We're not just lending money, we're investing in knowledge. The hologram changed again, showing plans for the Agricultural Education Center, but it was more than just classrooms and training facilities. There were community spaces, research labs, even a year-round indoor farmers market. This is phase 1, Chen continued. Future phases include processing facilities, direct-to-consumer marketing networks, even renewable energy projects. Everything owned and controlled by the cooperative. It's ambitious, Reverend Davis observed from his corner. Some might say too ambitious. They said the same thing to my grandfather, John replied, when he suggested farmers could own their own equipment instead of sharecropping. Times change. We either change with them or get left behind. The room fell quiet as farmers digested the scope of what was being proposed. John could see the mix of hope and hesitation on their faces, the same expression he'd worn when Chen first showed up at his gate. Sarah broke the silence. Look at this. She pulled up First National's foreclosure map, then overlaid it with the cooperative's growth projections. Every farm they tried to destroy becomes a strength in our network. Every family they tried to break becomes part of something bigger. And Wellington? Bill asked. His friends at other banks won't like. This, Chen's smile was sharp. That's why we move fast. The federal investigation opens a window of opportunity. While they're dealing with that, we build something they can't tear down. One by one, farmers began to step forward. Bill Henderson was first, then the Ramirez, followed by Tommy Tucker. Even Pete Wilson made his way to the charter, shaking his head but smiling. My daddy would call this crazy, he said, reaching for the pen. But my daddy never saw a drone save a crop either. As signatures filled the page, John felt the weight of history in his pocket. The watch that had timed 3 generations of harvests was now timing something new, a revolution not of destruction, but of growth. Sarah, he whispered, watching his community transform before his eyes, your mother would be so proud. Outside, the evening sun painted the fields in gold, and somewhere in the distance, storm clouds gathered. But this time they were ready. This time they would weather it together. The foreclosure notices arrived like a coordinated strike. 37 farms hit on the same morning. Wellington's last desperate gambit wasn't subtle, but it was thorough. Each notice cited obscure loan clauses, technical defaults, and immediate payment requirements that would have been impossible even in good years. John found Sarah in the makeshift command center they'd set up in their barn, surrounded by tablets, laptops, and worried farmers. Old land deeds covered one wall, their yellowed pages telling a story of systematic manipulation that stretched back decades. He's using the Henderson precedent, Sarah explained, fingers flying over her keyboard. From 1983, when First National foreclosed on 6 farms in one day. The court upheld it because each loan was technically in default. But that was before the internet, Bill Henderson added grimly, before we could prove pattern and practice. Chen arrived as sunset painted the barn walls orange. He carried a stack of legal documents and a determination that radiated from him like heat. Wellington's not working with his usual law firm, he announced. They dropped him this morning. He's using out-of-state attorneys who don't know local agricultural law. That's sloppy, Sarah said, not looking up from her analysis. Almost. Like he's desperate, John finished. He pulled out his grandfather's watch, a habit that now brought comfort to others as much as himself. Show me the pattern again. Sarah projected a map onto the barn wall. Red dots marked each targeted farm, forming a strange pattern, until Chen stepped forward and overlaid another map, one showing underground water rights. He's not after the farms, Chen said quietly. He's after the aquifer access. His development. Company filed papers last week to build a water bottling plant. The barn erupted in angry mutters. Water rights were sacred in Texas, passed down through generations like family Bibles. But he made a mistake, Sarah said, excitement creeping into her voice. Look at these dates. She pulled up the foreclosure notices side by side with Wellington's development company filings. The timing was off by 2 crucial days. He filed for the water rights before initiating foreclosure. Chen nodded, understanding dawning. Which means he's admitting the foreclosures aren't about loan defaults, John said. They're about grabbing water rights he already has plans for. Tommy. Tucker burst through the barn door, waving his phone. Y'all need to see this. Wellington's at the county office right now, trying to fast-track the development permits. Perfect. Sarah was already typing. Dad, remember what you said about sunlight being the best disinfectant? The barn's projection screen lit up with a live stream from the county office. Wellington stood at the permit counter, his usual polish cracking under pressure. Behind him, farmers began filing in silently, each carrying deeds and documents Sarah had prepared. Mr. Wellington, the county clerk's voice came through clearly. There seems to be a question about water rights jurisdiction. The rights come with the foreclosed properties, Wellington snapped, which I've already explained, except you haven't foreclosed yet. John's voice rang out as he entered the frame. And according to Texas water law, you can't file intent to develop resources you don't legally own. Wellington spun around, face reddening as he saw the gathered farmers. This is harassment. I have every right to follow the law? Chen stepped into view, flanked by the FBI agents from earlier. Agent Roberts here has some interesting questions about the timing of your permit applications, as do I. Judge Martinez appeared, her presence commanding immediate respect. Mr. Wellington, my clerk tells me you've been attempting to pressure her into backdating certain documents. The county office fell silent. Wellington's face went from red to white. This is all a misunderstanding, he began, but the judge held up her hand. Save it for Chambers, and bring better lawyers. You'll need them. As Wellington was led away, John felt Sarah's hand slip into his. Around them, farmers were embracing, sharing relieved smiles and determined nods. The cooperative charter, Bill Henderson said quietly. How many signatures we up to? Sarah checked her tablet. 43. After this, I'm guessing that number's about to grow. John squeezed his daughter's hand, feeling the strength of generations in his grandfather's watch and the promise of the future in Sarah's grip. Outside, the Texas sun beat down on fields that had endured drought, flood, and hardship. But now, something new was growing, something Wellington had never understood. You couldn't foreclose on hope, and you couldn't break a community that had finally remembered how to stand together. The evening sun cast long shadows through Chen's office. Windows as he opened a worn leather journal, not the sleek notebooks he usually carried, but something older, personal. John and Sarah sat across from him, the day's victory at the county office still fresh in their minds. My father's journal, Chen explained, his usual corporate polish giving way to something more vulnerable. He wrote in it every day, recording more than just crop yields and weather patterns. He documented a struggle I've spent my life trying to understand. He turned the journal toward them. The pages were filled with careful Chinese characters, but photos were tucked between entries, old Polaroids of rice paddies, farming families, and a younger man with Chen's determined eyes. In 1978, my father's village in rural China faced something very similar to what's happening here. A powerful state-owned bank decided their traditional farming methods were obsolete. They pushed modernization loans that came with impossible terms. Sarah leaned forward, recognition dawning in her eyes. Like Wellington's predatory loans, almost exactly the same playbook. Chen nodded. My father organized the farmers, tried to fight back, but without legal protections, without the technology to prove what was happening. He paused, emotion briefly clouding his features. They lost everything. He died believing he had failed his community. John's hand went to his grandfather's watch, understanding deepening. That's why you were at the bank that day. You recognized what Wellington was doing. I recognized the pattern. Chen stood, walking to his window. But what caught my attention was your response, John. You walked out with dignity, just like my father did. The difference is today we have tools he couldn't have imagined. He pressed a button, and a holographic display sprang to life, but not of Riverside County. Instead, it showed a rural Chinese village, transformed by the same agricultural technology they'd been implementing. 5 years ago, I found my father's village, bought back the land, introduced sustainable farming methods, established a cooperative banking system. His smile held both pride and sadness. They're thriving now. But I couldn't help thinking about all the other communities facing the same fight. Sarah was already connecting the dots. The other farms you helped, they're all places where predatory banking was destroying rural communities. 23 communities in 12 countries. Chen pulled up a global map, points of light marking each success story. But Riverside County, this was different. When I saw you standing up to Wellington, I saw a chance to not just stop the damage, but to create something new. Something my father dreamed of, but never lived to see. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a stack of papers, property deeds, bank records, corporate filings. Wellington wasn't the only one tracking patterns. I've spent years documenting how banks like First National target rural communities. The federal investigation isn't just about one corrupt manager. It's about exposing a systemic problem. John studied Chen's face, seeing past the billionaire facade to the farmer's son beneath. Why didn't you tell us this from the beginning? Because it had to be your fight, not mine. Chen's voice was firm. Your community needed to find its own strength, make its own choices. I could provide tools and opportunities, but the courage... He gestured to the bustling farmer's market visible through his window. That came from your people. Sarah's tablet chimed. More signatures on the cooperative charter, more farmers joining the movement. It's not just about farming anymore, is it? This is about changing the whole system. It's about balance, Chen corrected gently, finding ways for traditional wisdom and modern innovation to work together. Banking that serves community needs instead of exploiting them. Technology that empowers rather than replaces. He picked up his father's journal again, running his fingers over its worn cover. My father wrote something here. His last entry before the bank took everything. He said, "The earth remembers those who tend it with respect. One day, someone will remember us." John stood, pulled out his grandfather's watch, and placed it next to Chen's journal. "Then and now," he said quietly. "Different times, same fight. Different ending, though," Sarah added, her voice strong with conviction. "This time, we win." Outside, the Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of promise, while inside a billionaire's office, 3 people from different worlds found common ground in the simple truth that had guided farmers for generations. The land belongs to those who love it, tend it, and fight to protect it. Chen's father's journal and John's grandfather's watch lay side by side, 2 pieces of a story that was still being written, a story about remembering roots while reaching for the sky. The new bank charter arrived on a Tuesday morning, its gold seal gleaming under the Texas sun. First Community Agricultural Bank of Riverside County. The name was a mouthful, but every word had been chosen with purpose. Inside the former First National Building, John watched as Sarah directed the installation of modern banking terminals alongside displays of local farming history. The old and the new, Chen observed, standing beside him. Just like it should be. The lobby had been transformed. Gone were the intimidating marble barriers and closed office doors. Instead, an open floor plan welcomed visitors, with consultation areas featuring both digital displays and comfortable chairs for face-to-face conversations. "Mr. Miller?" Tommy Tucker approached, tablet in hand. "The first round of agricultural education loans is ready for review. 23 applications, all pre-screened according to the cooperative's guidelines." John smiled at the confidence in the young man's voice. Tommy had been one of the first to sign up for the bank's training program, combining his farming background with new financial expertise. "Let's take a look," John said, leading them to a consultation area. The digital display came to life, showing detailed analyses of each application. "Remember what my grandfather used to say about loans? Money's like water," Tommy quoted. "It should flow through the community, not away from it." Sarah joined them, fresh from installing the last of the soil monitoring displays that would let farmers track their land's health right from the bank lobby. "Speaking of flow, look at this." She pulled up a comparison chart. In just 3 months since Wellington's departure, loan default rates had dropped by 60%. Average farm yields were up, water usage was down, and community participation in agricultural education programs had skyrocketed. "It's not just the technology," Chen noted. "It's the trust. When people know their bank understands farming, they're more willing to ask for help before problems become crises." A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Richard Wellington stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow in a suit that no longer seemed to fit quite right. The federal investigation had taken its toll. His hair had grayed at the temples, and his usual arrogant posture had given way to something more uncertain. "The regional director sent me," he said, his voice lacking its former authority, to review the transition." John exchanged glances with Chen before approaching his former adversary. "Tommy, why don't you show Mr. Wellington how our new loan review process works?" Wellington flinched at being addressed by the young farmer he'd once dismissed, but followed Tommy to a consultation area. On the display, decades of predatory banking. Practices were being systematically undone, replaced by something more sustainable, more human. "We're not just lending money," Tommy explained, pulling up the cooperative's charter. "We're investing in community knowledge. Every loan includes education credits, access to technological resources, and participation in our mentorship program." "But the risk factors," Wellington began, "are lower than they've ever been," Sarah interrupted, joining them. She displayed the latest data: crop yields, water usage, loan repayment rates. "Turns out, when you help farmers succeed instead of waiting for them to fail, banking becomes more profitable, not less." Wellington stared at the numbers, seeing his worldview crumble in real time. "I never thought—" "That's right," John said, quietly. "You never did. But it's not too late to learn." Through the bank's windows, they could see farmers gathering for an educational seminar in the community room. Bill Henderson was teaching today, sharing his experience with the new irrigation systems. The room was full. Young faces mixed with old, tablets alongside traditional notebooks. "Your report to the regional director," Chen said to Wellington, "might mention how traditional agricultural wisdom combined with modern financial tools can transform a community. If you're interested, Tommy can show you the numbers." Wellington nodded slowly, the fight gone out of him. As Tommy led him through the data, John felt Sarah's hand slip into his. "Dad," she whispered, "look what we built." John squeezed her hand. feeling his grandfather's watch tick steadily in his pocket. The old timepiece had measured out the rhythm of planting and harvest for 3 generations. Now it was keeping time for something new, a future where the land and those who worked it were valued not just for their yield, but for their wisdom. Outside, the Texas sun shone down on fields that were greener than they'd been in years, nourished by rain, technology, and the strength of a community that had finally learned to harvest hope alongside its crops. The federal courthouse in Austin hummed with tension as Special Agent Roberts laid out the evidence against First National Bank. Boxes of documents lined the walls, loan records, foreclosure notices, internal memos that painted a damning picture of systematic exploitation. "The pattern is clear," Roberts explained to the packed gallery. "Over 2 decades, First National Bank, under Mr. Wellington's direction, specifically targeted family farms with predatory lending practices designed to force foreclosures." John sat between Sarah and Chen in the front row, watching Wellington shrink behind his defense table as each piece of evidence struck home. The former bank manager's expensive suit couldn't hide how far he'd fallen. His shoulders hunched, his once imperious gaze fixed on the table before him. "The government presents Exhibit 147, Roberts continued, pulling up a familiar document. "A loan application from the Miller farm, dated March 15th. Note the approval timestamps, rejected in under 3 minutes, without any review of the supporting documentation." Sarah's analysis filled the courtroom screens. Dozens of similar rejections, each one part of a larger strategy to devalue agricultural properties for later acquisition by Wellington's development companies. "Your Honor," Wellington's lawyer began, but the judge cut him off. "Save it for your client's testimony, Counselor. I've seen enough pattern evidence to know where this is going." From his seat, John could see other farmers in the gallery. Faces that had once shown defeat now blazed with vindication. Bill Henderson nodded grimly as each new piece of evidence confirmed what they'd known in their hearts for years. "The FBI investigation has uncovered similar patterns in 6 other counties," Roberts announced. "Mr. Wellington's methods became a template for rural bank managers across the state." Wellington finally looked up, meeting John's gaze for the first. In time, something passed between them, not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition. The system Wellington had served was crumbling, and with it, the power he'd wielded so carelessly. "Does the defendant wish to make a statement?" the judge asked. Wellington stood slowly, his voice barely carrying across the hushed courtroom. I never saw them as people, just numbers on a spreadsheet, risks to be managed, assets to be acquired." He turned to face the gallery. "I told myself I was modernizing agriculture, but really, I was destroying something I didn't understand." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Richard Wellington, this court finds you guilty of multiple counts of banking fraud, predatory lending, and conspiracy to defraud. You are hereby sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to make restitution to the affected families." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Chen and the farmers, but John hung back, watching his community embrace their victory with quiet dignity. "Dad," Sarah touched his arm, "the U.S. Attorney wants to talk about using our banking model as a template for rural financial reform." John pulled out his grandfather's watch, its steady ticking a reminder of how time brought all things to balance. "You handle that part, sweetheart. I've got fields waiting at home." "Some things never change," she smiled, but her eyes shone with pride. Chen joined them, his usual corporate polish softened by genuine emotion. "The cooperative's new banking charter has been fast-tracked. The federal regulators were impressed by how we handled the transition." "They're not the ones I was worried about impressing," John replied, gesturing to where Bill Henderson was talking to a group of young farmers. "Those are the people who matter." Through the courthouse windows, they could see Wellington being led to a waiting federal vehicle. The man who had once towered over their community now looked small, diminished not by his punishment, but by the realization of what he'd almost destroyed. "You know what the hardest part is," Sarah said softly. "Remembering how many families didn't make it to see this day, the Johnsons, the Carvers. Then we make sure their stories are part of what we're building," John decided. "Every loan officer at First Community needs to know what happened here. Not for vengeance, for wisdom," Chen finished. "Like my father's journal. Some lessons need to be remembered." As they walked down the courthouse steps, John saw Tommy Tucker waiting by his truck, tablet in hand. "Mr. Miller, the first graduating class from our agricultural finance program. They want you to speak at the ceremony." John smiled, thinking of his grandfather, who'd believed banking should serve the land and its people, not the other way around. "Tell them I'd be honored. But first, we've got spring planting to think about." The Texas sun painted the courthouse, steps in warm light as justice and hope intertwined like wheat growing strong in fertile soil. Wellington's defeat wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of something his spreadsheets could never have measured, a community's renewal, rooted in wisdom old as the land itself. The Agricultural Innovation Center rose from Miller's East Field like a vision of the future, grounded in the past. Its modern solar panels and gleaming windows contrasted with the weathered barnwood that clad its walls. Salvaged from old structures throughout the county, each board carrying its own history. Sarah stood in what would become the main classroom, surrounded by a mix of high-tech displays and traditional farming implements. Through the windows, she could see the demonstration fields where old and new methods would be taught side by side. "Your mother would have loved this," John said, joining her. His boots left dusty prints on the newly finished floor, the first marks in what would become a pathway of learning. "She always said education was the best crop we could grow, Tommy." Tucker burst in, excitement overriding his usual calm. "The first satellite uplink is live. We can start connecting with other farming communities worldwide." On the main display, faces appeared from across the globe. Farmers from Chen's other cooperative projects, each with their own stories of community transformation. A rice farmer from Chen's father's village waved, speaking through a translator, about sustainable irrigation techniques. "This is what Wellington never understood," Sarah said, watching the international exchange of agricultural wisdom. "Farming isn't just about the land. It's about knowledge passed down and forward." At the same time, Bill Henderson entered with a group of young farmers, their tablets out as he explained the center's soil monitoring system. "See here? The sensors don't replace walking your fields. They enhance what your eyes and hands tell you." The young farmers gathered around a traditional soil testing station next to the digital displays. One of them, Jenny Ramirez, Maria's granddaughter, demonstrated how to feel soil composition with her fingers before comparing her assessment to the sensor readings. "She's got a natural touch for teaching," John observed, watching Jenny explain. "The relationship between traditional knowledge and modern data." "They all do," Sarah replied. "Every family here carries generations of farming wisdom. Now they have new ways to share it." Chen arrived as the afternoon sun painted the classroom in amber light. He carried his father's journal, now digitized, and integrated into the center's curriculum alongside other stories of agricultural heritage and innovation. "The World Agricultural Coalition is impressed," he announced. "They want to use this as a model for other rural communities facing similar challenges." Sarah pulled up the center's schedule on the main display. Classes on sustainable farming, practices, agricultural finance, water management, each one taught by local farmers alongside technical experts. The waiting list already stretched months ahead. "We're not just teaching farming," she explained to the gathered group. "We're teaching resilience, how to adapt without losing your roots." John watched his daughter command the room with quiet confidence, seeing in her the perfect bridge between tradition and progress. She understood both the code running the soil sensors and the feel of earth between her fingers. The cooperatives lending program, Tommy added, is already showing results. 97% of our first graduating class has successfully implemented sustainable farming practices. Through the windows, they could see the demonstration fields where different irrigation methods were being tested. Traditional furrow irrigation flowed alongside modern drip systems, each teaching its own lessons about water conservation. Next month's focus, Sarah continued, pulling up the curriculum, is on climate resilience. We're combining historical weather pattern knowledge with satellite data to help farms prepare for changing conditions. Jenny raised her hand. My grandmother mentioned something about that. She says the old-timers could read weather in the way clouds formed over Miller's Ridge. Exactly, John nodded. And now we can understand why those cloud patterns meant what they did. The science explains the wisdom, and the wisdom grounds the science. As the sun set, the center's solar-powered lights came on automatically, but the soft glow seemed to come as much from the people as the fixtures. Farmers young and old lingered, sharing stories and insights, each one adding to the growing body of knowledge that would help their community thrive. Sarah found her father by the soil testing station, his fingers automatically checking the composition of a sample. You know, Dad, when you stood up to Wellington that day at the bank, you were teaching too, teaching all of us about dignity and perseverance. John smiled, pulling out his grandfather's watch. Teaching and learning, all at the same time, just like this place. Outside, the evening star appeared over fields that stretched toward the horizon, fields that would feed and teach generations to come, growing wisdom alongside their crops. The marble floors of First Community Bank no longer echoed with John Miller's footsteps. The boots that had once left dusty prints of defiance now walked with quiet purpose, carrying him to the office that had previously been Wellington's domain. But where the former bank manager had hidden behind closed doors and bureaucracy, John's office remained open, its glass walls symbolizing the transparency he'd fought so hard to establish. The Robertson application is ready for review, Tommy announced, tablet in hand. Their soil analysis shows promise for that organic transition. They're planning, John nodded, pulling out his grandfather's watch to check the time. Sarah's presentation starts in an hour. Let's make this quick. The loan review process had been transformed. Where Wellington had once glanced at numbers and made snap judgments, John's desk now displayed a holographic model of the Robertson farm, complete with seasonal projections and community impact assessments. They've completed the education requirements, he asked, though he already knew the answer. No loan application reached his desk without meeting the cooperative standards for both financial and agricultural literacy. Top of their class, Tommy confirmed. Jenny Ramirez says their teenage son has a real gift for drone programming. The mention of youth involvement brought a smile to John's face. More and more farm kids were staying in the community now, finding ways to combine their tech-savvy skills with agricultural traditions. Dad, Sarah's voice carried through the open office. She practically bounced in, wearing a graduation gown over her usual practical attire. The acceptance letter came. John's heart swelled. The MIT Agricultural Technology Program, a dream that had once seemed impossible, now made real through her pioneering work at the Innovation Center. They're not just accepting me as a student, she continued, eyes shining. They want me to help develop their rural banking curriculum. They've been following what we've done here. Chen appeared in the doorway, his usual corporate polish softened by genuine pride. The World Bank is interested too. They're looking at our model for developing nations. John stood, touching his grandfather's watch for courage. Sarah, about your college plans. The board met this morning. She paused, concern flickering across her face. Dad, we want to establish a satellite campus here, he said. MIT agrees. You'll split your time between Boston and Riverside County, teaching while you learn, learning while you teach. The joy that lit up her face was everything he'd ever worked for. Really? But the cost is an investment in our community's future, Chen finished. Just like your father's stand against Wellington was. Through the bank's windows, they could see farmers gathering for Sarah's graduation speech. Bill Henderson was there, showing off tablet displays to a group of venture capitalists interested in sustainable agriculture. The Ramirez family had brought enough tamales to feed half the county. Even Pete Wilson had traded his skepticism for pride, proudly wearing a First Community Agricultural Bank cap. "Time to get going," Tommy reminded them. The governors already arrived for the ceremony. As they walked through the bank lobby, John noticed something that would have been unthinkable in Wellington's day. Farmers in work boots sat comfortably beside suits from Austin, all waiting for routine business. The digital displays showed real-time crop data alongside loan rates, while soil samples and traditional farming tools occupied places of honor in glass cases. "You know what Mom used to say about money and water?" Sarah asked as they stepped. Outside, John smiled. Both should nourish what matters. The Texas sun shone down on a community transformed. Where Wellington had seen only assets to be acquired, life was flourishing. The Innovation Center's solar panels gleamed above fields, where experimental crops grew alongside traditional plantings. Drones monitored moisture levels while farmers walked their land, combining digital readings with generations of hands-on wisdom. At the podium, Sarah's voice carried across the gathered crowd, strong with purpose. "A year ago, we stood in this same spot, watching justice finally come to our community. But justice wasn't enough. We needed to build something new, something that honored our past while embracing our future." John fingered his grandfather's watch, its steady ticking marking time between what had been and what was becoming. Chen stood beside him, his father's journal tucked respectfully in his pocket. "Today," Sarah continued, "we're not just celebrating my graduation or our community's success. We're celebrating a truth that Wellington never understood. Real wealth grows from the ground up, nourished by wisdom old as the soil and innovations yet to come." The crowd erupted in applause, and John Miller, farmer, banker, community leader, felt his eyes grow moist. His boots still left marks on the marble floor, but now they walked a path of pride, not defiance. A path that led toward hope. 1 year later, the autumn sun painted Miller's East Field gold as combines guided by GPS harvested the most bountiful crop in county history. John stood at the edge of his land, his grandfather's watch marking time as it had for 3 generations. But now it kept pace with more than just the farming day. It measured the heartbeat of a community reborn. Sarah's voice carried across the field from the Innovation Center, where she was conducting a virtual lecture for MIT students, while simultaneously teaching local farmers. Her image projected alongside real-time crop data, reaching audiences from Boston to Bangladesh. "The key to sustainable agriculture," she was saying, "isn't choosing between tradition and technology. It's understanding how they strengthen each other." Through the center's windows, John could see Tommy Tucker leading a group of international bankers through the demonstration floor. First Community's banking model had become a case study in rural development, with delegations arriving weekly to learn their methods. "Mr. Miller," Jenny Ramirez approached, tablet in hand, but dirt still fresh on her boots. "The World Agricultural Summit wants you to keynote next month. They're calling Riverside County the future of farming." John smiled, remembering a time when their future had seemed as barren as drought-stricken fields. "Tell them I'll speak, but only if they let real farmers ask the real questions." The sound of children's laughter drew his attention to the community garden where Maria Ramirez was teaching third graders about soil composition. Each child carried a tablet, but their hands were deep in the earth, learning the timeless feel of growing things. Chen's Mercedes pulled up quietly, but instead of his usual suit, he wore boots and work clothes. He'd taken to spending more time in the fields lately, saying it helped him remember his father's wisdom. "The Federal Reserve study came out," he said, joining John. "They're recommending our banking model for rural communities nationwide. Wellington's replacement at First National's regional office is already implementing changes." John nodded, feeling the weight of his grandfather's watch, a weight that now felt less like burden and more like blessing. Sometimes the best revenge is showing them a better way. A drone hummed overhead, monitoring crop health, while nearby a farmer walked, his rows the old way, checking plants with practiced hands. The two methods working together, just like the community itself. Sarah joined them as the sun began to set. Her MIT acceptance letter now framed alongside traditional farming tools in the center's heritage display. "Dad, remember what you said? The day Wellington tore up our loan application? That a man's worth can't be measured in columns of red ink?" "No," she smiled, taking his hand. "That honest work and clean living would see us through. You were right, just not in the way we expected." As evening settled over Riverside County, lights came on at the Innovation Center, where the next generation of farmer bankers was learning to blend old wisdom with new tools. The marble floors of First Community Bank no longer echoed with defeat, but rang with purpose, and somewhere in the quiet rhythm of growth and change, John Miller's grandfather's watch kept time for a future its original owner could never have imagined, but would surely have understood.